Media fact checker. Woman charged with murder of Katherine Sanowski in Ipswich home. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 42-year-old woman named Katherine Sanowski was found dead inside a property on Beryl Court, Belbird Park, Ipswich on February 19, 2024, after police were called due to a street disturbance. A 34-year-old woman named Logan Valentine Edwards was found at the scene and taken to hospital for medical assessment on February 19, 2024. Detectives from the Ipswich Criminal Investigation Branch and Homicide Squad charged Edwards with one count of murder, domestic violence, on February 20, 2024. The case was adjourned for 2 weeks and Edwards was remanded in custody on February 20, 2024, with her court appearance scheduled for Ipswich Magistrates Court. The post-mortem revealed suspicious circumstances surrounding Ms. Sanowski's death, escalating the investigation to homicide. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the charge includes domestic violence in parentheses after murder, while Newscamau states there were no prior reports of domestic violence. Newscamau mentions the body was dead for about 2 weeks, but ABC does not specify the time since death. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Gerry Adams civil trial over alleged IRA membership and bombings in London courts. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Gerry Adams is 77 years old and is being sued in London's Civil High Court by 3 survivors of IRA bombings, John Clark, Jonathan Ganesh, Barry Laycock, seeking symbolic £1 damages each. The claimants allege Adams was a senior IRA leader, including as a member of the IRA Army Council, and personally liable for the 1973 Old Bailey bombing, 1996 Docklands bombing, and 1996 Manchester bombing. Adams denies ever being a member of the IRA or holding any rank, repeatedly stating, "I was never a member of the IRA or its Army Council and I don't distance myself from the IRA." Adams wore a green tie with a shamrock and Palestinian flag pin while testifying in court on St. Patrick's Day, the 17th of March. Adams' counsel, Edward Craven KC, argued there is extremely limited evidence implicating Adams in the bombings, with not a single page in the 6,000-page bundle directly linking him to the attacks. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Adams wore a Palestinian flag pin alongside his shamrock, while Article 3 does not mention the Palestinian flag pin. Article 1 reports Adams saying, "I don't distance myself from the IRA and I stand by the IRA," but Article 3 omits these exact phrases, focusing instead on his denial of IRA membership. Article 2 claims Adams denied having any prior knowledge of the 1996 Docklands bombing, but Article 1 does not explicitly address his knowledge of the bombing. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's tariff policy and Supreme Court ruling on trade duties. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump claimed on Sunday he has the absolute right to impose new tariffs after the US Supreme Court ruled many of his 2023 tariffs were illegal, both sources. The Supreme Court in February 2024 found the Trump administration lacked sufficient legal justification to use the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, for many tariffs imposed on global trade, both sources. Trump imposed 10% tariffs on goods from much of the world under Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act as a temporary replacement, with these expiring on July 15, 2024, both sources. Trump vowed to raise the temporary 10% tariffs to 15% but has yet to do so, both sources. US officials launched trade investigations last week to justify a new wave of permanent tariffs, both sources. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources on core factual claims. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Kangaroo Island Council's proposed feral cat eradication policy and progress. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kangaroo Island Council is considering a last cat policy to ban new pet cats from the island as part of a feral cat eradication effort. Mayor Michael Pengelly stated the goal is to rid Kangaroo Island of feral cats and not allow any more cats in by 2030. The Dudley Peninsula project on Kangaroo Island has removed 2,800 feral cats, leaving around 150 remaining. Feral cats contribute to a $12 million annual decline in sheep production due to toxoplasmosis, according to Mayor Pengelly and Jack Goff. The federal government provided $1.61 million in December 2023 to the project, with the Invasive Species Council stating $3.1 million more is needed for full eradication. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the council's last cat policy is not that far advanced, while ABC describes it as an idea that the current council would like to see put in place without specifying advancement. News Kamau mentions the council aims to totally strip the island of the invasive species by 2030, while ABC does not explicitly state this timeline for the entire island, only the Dudley Peninsula. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Pauline Hanson's One Nation surge benefits Labour via electoral system flaws. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Pauline Hanson's One Nation party secured 20% of the vote in recent elections. Labour's primary vote remained stable at 39% despite right-wing fragmentation. Liberal Party vote collapsed to 19% in the same election cycle. One Nation surged in outer suburbs and regional centres like metropolitan Adelaide. One Nation finished fourth in Adelaide behind Labour, One Nation, and the Greens. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Hawaii faces severe flooding, dam risks, and evacuations due to extreme rainfall. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. More than 4,000 people were ordered to evacuate in Waialua and Haliwa, Oahu, due to flooding, ABC, Guardian. The 120-year-old Wahiawa Dam on Oahu is at risk of imminent failure and water was actively running over its spillway at 1,500 gallons per second, ABC, Guardian. Hawaii Governor Josh Green activated the Hawaii National Guard to respond to the flooding, ABC, Guardian. Northern Oahu was under a flash flood warning with widespread life-threatening flash flooding reported by the National Weather Service, ABC, Guardian. Evacuation orders were issued for areas downstream of the Wahiawa Dam, including Waialua and Haliwa, ABC, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports 4,000 people were ordered to evacuate, while The Guardian states 5,500 people were under evacuation orders. ABC mentions the evacuation advisory for Lahaina was not an order, while The Guardian says it was later upgraded to a warning. ABC states the dam was at risk of imminent failure and water was running over the spillway, but The Guardian notes the dam appeared less of a concern than other flooding hazards. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's economic risks from US-Iran conflict and domestic policy fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Barry Cassidy and Tony Barry discuss the fuel crisis in Australia linked to geopolitical tensions. The Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, has raised the cash rate. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is described as opening the door for a potential recession. Liberal MP Andrew Hastie criticizes US President Trump's approach to Iran. The Albanese government faces public blame for economic fallout from US-Iran tensions. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Timothée Chalamet's failed Oscar campaign for Marty Supreme in 2026. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Timothée Chalamet lost Best Leading Actor at the 98th Academy Awards to Michael B. Jordan for Sinners. Chalamet was nominated for Best Actor twice in 2026, including for Marty Supreme and A Complete Unknown. Chalamet won the 2025 SAG Award, Now Actor Awards, for Best Lead Actor in A Complete Unknown, defeating Adrien Brody. Marty Supreme grossed $147 million worldwide, becoming A24's highest-grossing film ever, surpassing Everything Everywhere All at Once. Chalamet's Oscar odds peaked at 86% at the Gold Derby after winning the Golden Globe and Critics' Choice Awards. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Chalamet's ballet opera comments were unfortunately phrased pull quotes that may have ended his Oscar dreams, while The Guardian says they were made after voting had closed, implying less direct impact. ABC reports Chalamet's Oscar odds dropped to 63% after the backlash, but The Guardian does not provide a specific odds figure post-backlash. ABC describes Chalamet's SAG win in 2025 as finally trouncing Brody, while The Guardian frames it as Brody being a frontrunner Chalamet defeated, without emphasizing a decisive victory. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NFL player Cam Skattebo's controversial denial of CTE and asthma legitimacy sparks backlash and apology. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Cam Skattebo, a 24-year-old New York Giants running back, dismissed chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, as an excuse and asthma as fake during a Bring the Juice podcast appearance in 2025. CTE is a degenerative brain condition linked to repeated head trauma, marked by abnormal tau protein buildup and symptoms including cognitive decline, behavioral changes, and dementia, with definitive diagnosis only possible posthumously. A 2017 Boston University study found CTE in 110 of 111 former NFL players examined, and the NFL acknowledged a link between football and CTE in 2016. Skattebo was a fourth-round pick out of Arizona State in the 2025 NFL Draft and finished his rookie season with 410 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns in 8 games before an ankle injury ended it. Skattebo apologized on X, formerly Twitter, for his comments, stating they were a tasteless joke and not meant to downplay the seriousness of the conditions. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Skattebo called asthma fake too and said people should just breathe air, while Article 2 does not explicitly repeat the just breathe air quote. Article 1 mentions a 2023 Boston University study finding CTE in roughly 92% of former NFL players, while Article 2 references a 2017 study finding CTE in 110 of 111 former NFL players examined. Article 1 does not mention Skattebo's mother's response or her personal anecdote about asthma, which is included in Article 2. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israel's strike on Iran's South Pars gas field and Iran's retaliatory attacks on Gulf energy infrastructure. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Israel bombed Iranian facilities linked to the South Pars gas field, the largest natural gas field in the world, shared with Qatar, ABC, Guardian, ABC, Guardian, ABC, Guardian, 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 Guardian. Iran retaliated by launching strikes on Qatar's Ras Laffan gas complex, causing extensive damage and knocking out about 17%, or 12.8 m/t/year, of its LNG export capacity, ABC, Guardian, 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 ABC, Guardian, Guardian. QatarEnergy estimated $20 billion in damage to Ras Laffan and repairs could take 3 to 5 years, ABC, Guardian, 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 ABC. Iran's Revolutionary Guards warned that Saudi Arabia's Samref refinery, Yanbu, UAE's Al Hosn gas field, and Qatar's Mesaieed petrochemical complex were direct and legitimate targets, Guardian, 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 Guardian. Iran's strikes also hit Saudi Arabia's Red Sea refinery, Samref, 2 Kuwaiti oil refineries, Mina al-Amadi and Mina Abdullah, and the UAE's Habshan gas processing facility, Guardian, Guardian, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Guardian both report Trump claimed he knew nothing about the Israeli strike on South Pars, but Israeli officials and Yoel Gazansky, from Tel Aviv University, stated the US was informed or even coordinated the attack. ABC, Guardian, ABC. The Guardian reports Trump's Treasury Secretary suggested lifting sanctions on Iranian cargoes at sea, while Trump's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a bellicose warning to Iran, creating conflicting messaging from the administration. Article 2. The Guardian's editorial claims Trump's foreign policy is decapitate and delegate, while ABC and Guardian articles focus on Trump's denial of prior knowledge of the South Pars strike. Article 4 versus ABC, Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Sri Lanka and Asia's fuel crisis due to Middle East war and Strait of Hormuz blockage. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Sri Lanka introduced a 4-day work week starting Wednesday, local time, for state institutions, schools, and universities, with Wednesday as a mandatory holiday for the private sector. ABC, Newscamau, Guardian. Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz on February 28, 2024, in retaliation for US-Israeli airstrikes, cutting 20% of global oil exports and 80% of Asia's oil LNG supply. ABC, Newscamau, Guardian. Sri Lanka's fuel reserves would last nearly 6 weeks but warned fresh supply disruptions could severely impact the country. ABC, Newscamau, Guardian. Sri Lanka imposed fuel rationing, 15 litres per week for cars, 5 litres for motorbikes, and 200 litres for public transport. ABC, Newscamau, Guardian. President Anura Kumara Dissanayake declared at an emergency meeting, "We must prepare for the worst, but hope for the best." ABC, Newscamau, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Newscamau report Sri Lanka's fuel reserves would last nearly 6 weeks, but Guardian does not specify a duration for Sri Lanka's reserves. Newscamau states Thailand's government suggested workers ditch suits and ties to save on air conditioning, while ABC reports Thailand only suggested short-sleeved shirts. ABC mentions Myanmar's military government imposed alternate-day driving restrictions, but Guardian does not mention Myanmar's fuel restrictions. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicola Ollislagers finishes as silver medalist in women's high jump at World Indoor Championships. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicola Ollislagers finished in a 3-way share of second place, silver, in the women's high jump at the World Athletics Indoor Championships in Torun, Poland. Ollislagers cleared 1.99 meters to share silver with Yaroslava Mahuchika's gold, 2.01 m, Yulia Levchenko, and Angelina Topic. Yaroslava Mahuchik won gold with a clearance of 2.01 meters. Eleanor Patterson finished 7th in the women's high jump with a clearance of 1.93 meters. Peter Bol advanced to the men's 800-meter semifinals with a heat win in 1 minute and 45.87 seconds. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Eleanor Patterson's time as 1.93 m, while Guardian does not specify her exact height but implies she struggled below 1.93 m. ABC reports Jess Hull's qualifying time as 4 minutes and 12.45 seconds, but Guardian does not mention her time or qualification. ABC reports Adam Spencer's qualifying time as 3 minutes and 40.79 seconds, but Guardian does not mention his time or qualification. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann faces Queensland rape trial in November 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Bruce Lehrmann, 30, is charged with 2 counts of rape in Toowoomba, Queensland, stemming from alleged incidents in October 2021. The trial is scheduled to begin on November 2, 2024, in Toowoomba District Court before Judge Deborah Richards. Lehrman met the complainant at the Volt strip club in Toowoomba and later allegedly sexually assaulted her twice without consent. Lehrman was charged in January 2023 and committed for trial in July 2024. Defense solicitor Zali Burrows has indicated Lehrman may contest the charges and is still deciding whether to seek a judge-alone trial or a jury trial. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources on core factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 2026 Women's Asian Cup Final between Australia's Matildas and Japan. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Women's Asian Cup Final was played on March 21, 2026, at Stadium Australia in Sydney, Australia. Japan won the final 1-0 against Australia, securing their third Women's Asian Cup title. Mika Hameno scored the winning goal for Japan in the 15th minute of the final. Australia's Matildas reached the final after defeating China 2-1 in the semi-final at Perth Stadium on March 17, 2026. Sam Kerr scored a crucial goal for Australia in the semi-final against China, putting Australia ahead 2-1 in stoppage time. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC both report that the Matildas scored 2-1 against China in the semi-final, but ABC describes it as a 2-1 defeat while The Guardian describes it as a 2-1 victory. This is a semantic inconsistency rather than factual contradiction. The Guardian mentions that Japan had not lost a match in 90 minutes in the Asian Cup since 2010, but ABC does not mention this specific detail. The Guardian states that Japan's victory in the final was their first major trophy since 2018, while ABC does not explicitly state this but implies it by mentioning Japan's previous wins in 2014 and 2018. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. BHP and Woodside Energy announce new CEOs amid leadership transitions and corporate milestones. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Brandon Craig will become BHP's chief executive and director from July 1, 2025, succeeding Mike Henry. Brandon Craig previously served as BHP America's president and led the company's iron ore operations in Western Australia. BHP's market value makes it one of Australia's biggest companies by market capitalisation. Mike Henry's 6.5-year tenure at BHP saw the company become the world's largest copper producer. Elizabeth Westcott was appointed Woodside Energy's permanent CEO and managing director in 2025, succeeding Meg O'Neill. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the sources for core factual claims. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump criticizes Australia and NATO allies over Iran war and Strait of Hormuz blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump publicly criticized Australia, Japan, South Korea, and NATO allies for refusing to send warships to the Strait of Hormuz amid the Iran blockade, mentioned in Articles 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Transport Minister Catherine King confirmed Australia would not send ships to the Strait of Hormuz, stating we won't be sending a ship to the Strait of Hormuz, Articles 2, 6. Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has caused global oil supply disruptions and surging fuel prices, Articles 1, 2, 4, 6. Trump posted we do not need the help of anyone, and called NATO a one-way street, Articles 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Australia deployed an E-7A Wedgetail aircraft to the UAE in response to Gulf nations' requests for military support, Articles 2, 6. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 4, reports Trump said he was very surprised Australia declined to send troops, but ABC, Article 2, and Thege, Article 3, do not mention this specific reaction from Trump. ABC, Article 2, states Australia was not named in Trump's earlier requests for help, while THEJ, Article 3, implies Trump had previously referred to China, Japan, and South Korea but not Australia. The Guardian, Article 4, reports Trump did not answer when asked what Australia had said no to, but THEJ, Article 3, does not mention this exchange. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iranian women's football team asylum crisis after returning from Australia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 7 Iranian women's football team members, 5 players, 1 staff member, 1 player handler, initially sought asylum in Australia on March 10, 2024, after the team's silence during Iran's national anthem at the Women's Asian Cup. 5 of the 7 asylum seekers, including captain Zahra Ganbari, later withdrew their claims and returned to Iran via Malaysia, Oman, and Turkey, arriving in early March 2024. 2 players, Fatma Pasandadeh and Atfef Ramazanisadeh, remained in Australia and began training with Brisbane Roar's A-League women's squad without hijabs. The team's journey back to Iran was arranged by the Iranian embassy, with the players travelling through Kuala Lumpur International Airport, Malaysia, and Istanbul, Turkey, before crossing into Iran at the Gerbulak-Bazargan border. Iranian state media and officials, including Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Mehdi Taj, framed the players' return as a patriotic victory, with Ghalibaf calling them children of the homeland and Taj praising their manly courage. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and News Corp Australia report that Iranian staff member Zahra Sultan Moshkeka passed on threats from the regime to players, but Australian government sources deny these claims. The Guardian and News Corp Australia describe Iranian authorities as pressuring players' families, including interrogations and threats, while ABC's Marodi claims the players were directly threatened with execution if they stayed in Australia. News Corp Australia states Iranian state media filmed the players parading over the Israeli flag, but this detail is not mentioned in ABC, Guardian, or the other ABC article. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Kyle Sandilands contract termination and legal battle with ARN Media over radio show dispute. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kyle Sandilands and Jackie O. Henderson were co-hosts of the hit radio show The Kyle and Jackie O Show on Kiss FM, owned by ARN Media. Both Sandilands and Henderson signed $100 million, 10-year contracts with ARN Media in 2024, totaling a $200 million deal. The show's contracts were set to run until 2034, but ARN terminated Sandilands' contract on March 5, 2026, following an on-air argument on February 20, 2026. During the February 20 show, Sandilands accused Henderson of being off with the fairies and almost unworkable due to her fixation on horoscopes and astrology, which visibly upset her. ARN gave Sandilands a 14-day deadline, until March 5, to remedy the situation, which expired at midnight on March 5, 2026, triggering the contract termination. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report that ARN Media issued a notice of termination to Sandilands and Quasar Media, but The Age states Sandilands was informed via email at the stroke of midnight without an official notice. The Guardian and ABC state that Henderson did not quit or resign and was addressing the issue through legal channels, but news.com.au reports that Henderson's contract was terminated by ARN after she told management she could not continue working with Sandilands. The Guardian and ABC report that ARN Media disputes Sandilands' claims of no serious misconduct, but The Age and news.com.au imply ARN's termination was opportunistic and premeditated rather than based on misconduct alone. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iran's closure threat and disruption of the Strait of Hormuz during US-Israel war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea and is 30 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, with two 3.2-kilometer wide shipping lanes. Iran's Revolutionary Guard, IRGC, announced on March 1 that all navigation through the Strait of Hormuz is forbidden, effectively closing it to unauthorized vessels. Over 2,000 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz in a 15-day period in early February, but only 166 vessels did so in early March. Iran has attacked at least 20 vessels in confirmed incidents since March 1, including the US-owned Safe Sea Vishnu and Greek-owned Zephyros. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical choke point for global oil trade, with 20% of the world's oil normally flowing through it. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Iran's closure is a deliberate strategy to pressure the US and disrupt global trade, while The Guardian's Ambrose frames it as a psychological threat without formal closure. ABC cites Farzan Nademi stating that Iran's closure began after the 12-day war in 2023, but The Guardian does not reference this timeline or internal regime debates. ABC details Iran's rerouting of ships through Iranian territorial waters as a selective closure to deter US interference, a specific tactical move not mentioned by The Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Leadership crisis and potential spill in Victorian Labour Party ahead of 2024 election. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jacinta Allan is Victorian Premier and faces leadership spill speculation ahead of the November 2024 state election. Her net approval rating is -37%, Demos AU poll in Herald Sun, and 69% of coalition voters would direct preferences to One Nation over Labour, Redbridge survey for Australian Financial Review. Deputy Premier Ben Carroll, Right Faction, and Transport Infrastructure Minister Gabrielle Williams, Left Faction, are the most likely leadership contenders. Allan became Victorian Premier in September 2023 after succeeding Daniel Andrews. Labour's 2023 state election result was better than expected, temporarily easing leadership pressure on Allan. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports a grouping of socialist left MPs within the southeast are driving the push for a leadership change, but these MPs deny it. The Age says a factional chief offered the view that anyone other than Allan would lead the party to a better result, while ABC states no one has suggested anyone was counting numbers. The Guardian claims a push for a leadership change is underway with more than a dozen sources confirming it, but ABC says no one has approached ministers to canvass a change. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-Iran escalation over Strait of Hormuz and energy infrastructure threats in Middle East war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump gave Iran a 48-hour deadline, until 23:44 Greenwich Mean Time on March 25, to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz without threat, or face US strikes on Iran's power plants, posting on Truth Social on March 24, 2026. Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf stated that if Iran's power plants and infrastructure are targeted, vital infrastructure as well as energy and oil infrastructure across the entire region will be considered legitimate targets and will be irreversibly destroyed, according to statements on March 24 to 25, 2026. Iran's Military Operational Command Qatem al-Anbiya warned that if the US targets Iran's power plants, the Strait of Hormuz will be completely closed and will not reopen until Iran's destroyed power plants are rebuilt, as reported on March 24 to 25, 2026. Iran's missiles struck southern Israeli cities Dimona and Orod on March 24 to 25, injuring approximately 200 people, including children, and damaging buildings, with Israeli air defenses failing to intercept some strikes, confirmed by multiple sources. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed to vessels linked to Iran's enemies, US and Israel, as per Ali Mousavi, Iran's representative to the International Maritime Organization, on March 24 to 25, 2026. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Steve Reed, denied Iran was targeting Europe, stating he was not aware of any assessment that Iran intended to strike European capitals, while the Israeli military chief Eyal Zamir claimed Iran's missiles had a range reaching Berlin, Paris, or Berlin, implying a direct threat to Europe. ABC reported that Lebanese President Joseph Aoun accused Israel of laying the groundwork for an invasion in Lebanon's south, while Israel's military stated it was targeting Hezbollah infrastructure to contain the threat in the south and eliminate it, framing the strikes as defensive rather than preparatory for an invasion. The Guardian, Steve Reed, stated Trump was speaking for himself when threatening to obliterate Iran's power plants, while other sources, e.g., Newscomau, SMH, presented the threat as an official U.S. administration stance without qualifying it as Trump's personal opinion. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal judge blocks Pentagon's press access restrictions under Trump administration's policy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A federal judge, Paul Friedman, blocked key portions of the Pentagon's press access policy introduced in October 2025, ruling it unconstitutional under the First Amendment. The policy prohibited journalists from soliciting information the Pentagon did not directly provide and allowed revocation of credentials for non-compliant outlets. Only one of 56 news outlets in the Pentagon Press Association agreed to sign the new policy, leading to the loss of passes for most major outlets including the New York Times, Washington Post, and AP. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth approved the policy change in October 2025, and the Pentagon assembled a new press corps consisting of pro-Trump outlets after the exodus of mainstream reporters. The Trump administration plans to appeal the judge's ruling, with Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell stating they disagree with the decision. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the policy prohibited journalists from soliciting information the Pentagon did not directly provide, while ABC frames it as prohibiting journalists from seeking unauthorized information without specifying the Pentagon's role in authorization. The Guardian mentions the Pentagon assembled a new press corps of pro-Trump outlets and media personalities as evidence of viewpoint-based restrictions, but ABC does not explicitly state this as a direct consequence of the policy. The Guardian highlights that Justice Department lawyers acknowledged the policy was partly subjective, while ABC does not include this acknowledgement in its reporting. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Donald Trump's Pearl Harbor joke during a White House meeting with Japan's PM Sonai Takeichi. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump joked about Japan's 1941 Pearl Harbor attack during a White House press conference on December 7, 2023, saying we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? The Japanese Prime Minister Sonai Takeichi visibly reacted with discomfort, shifting in her seat and widening her eyes during Trump's remarks. The Pearl Harbor attack killed 2,390 Americans and led to the U.S. declaring war on Japan the next day, December 8, 1941. Trump's comments followed a question about why the U.S. did not notify allies like Japan before striking Iran. Japan's constitution bans the use of force except for self-defense, limiting its military involvement in conflicts like Iran. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports Trump initially said Japan's help in the Strait of Hormuz was not needed, but later claimed Japan was stepping up to the plate, while SMH does not mention this shift in tone. The Guardian does not mention the $40 billion nuclear project or $33 billion gas investment announced by ABC and SMH. ABC states Trump praised Takeichi as very popular, powerful woman, but The Guardian and SMH do not include this specific phrasing. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.